you know, this young woman, this young lady, I knew her. She came to my house, I remember, during the Aquino administration when she was working, not yet in the issue of DRR, but I believe it was on communications. PCOO, if I'm not mistaken, Attorney Lesley Cordero, with many things in common, aside from being a communicator, because you were then with the then secretary of the PCOO, yes, my good friend, yes. And she's also heavily into DRR. In fact, we will learn from her and we will exchange best practices. She in the World Bank scenario and how it can be applied to local governments. I'm also glad, maybe I should put my TOIM at my back as well. I will not say the year, but if you can guess the year, you have a gift of a Lola Maming's Robusta Blend coffee. If you can guess the year I was TOIM, of course, I don't have to guess what year Lesley Cordero was TOIM because it was just in 2020. Am I not mistaken, Lesley? So,
you're right.
Would you be able to guess? I will not put you on a spot. Hindi ako magagalit na pinapatanda mo ako. Anong taon ako naging TOIM?
I'm guessing it's 1997.
Aba, a little down, a little down. Okay,
1994.
Yes, my staff will get the exact year. That was before way before I became senator. I was very, very young. I was early 30s. You're dating me. That means kung 97, yes, pwede na rin because TOIM. But okay, let's not be funny here. Okay, I just wanted to lighten up our subject for today because it can be disastrous. It can be heavy, but we will lighten it by explaining what is disaster risk reduction, what is the issue of resilience, what is adaptation as opposed to mitigation, how can a senior disaster risk management expert of the World Bank help LGUs in the boondocks and in coastal communities. Just as a background, Attorney Lesley Cordero, aside from being a TOYM, ano ba yung TOYM? The Outstanding Young Men in the Philippines and Women. O dapat i-change the TOY. I think I suggested that a long time ago. 10 outstanding young persons na lang or humans, di ba? I will write them a letter. Okay. So Lesley is currently leading the implementation of the Philippines' third DRM development policy loan to support the government's response and recovery efforts for recent disasters and COVID-19. I just wanted to always underscore response because under our DRR law, response is just part of the whole gamut and we should not just always focus on response. And I'm sure Lesley will tell us about that. She was an undersecretary, as I said, in the OP before, graduated, very good, magna cum laude from University of San Carlos. She's also a lawyer, of course, and teaching, very good, in AIM, a master's in disaster risk and crisis management program, very good, and one of a TOIM. So we'll get back to you. You're wearing green and I'm wearing blue. So we're complete. Yes, we will have our other young climate leaders. Maybe I'd like you to say a few words, Lesley, before I introduce the other climate leaders.
Good morning, everyone who's watching. Good morning, Senator Loren. Maayong buntag sa inyong tanan sa Visayas.
Maayong buntag. Alam kong Cebuano ka. Yes, San Carlos University, right? Yes, very good. Maayong buntag ka ninyong tanan. Batiin mo. I'm sure sana nag-text ka sa mga kababayan natin sa Cebu, sa Region 7 na manood sa isang climate leader na taga Bisaya. Nanonood sila. Batiin mo sila. Ayan.
Maayong buntag sa tanang mga taga Cebu ug taga Surigao because my dad is from Surigao. So
very
everyone
good.
Who's watching, maayong buntag sa inyong tanan.
Very good. At sa mga antikenyo, mga kinaraya, mayad nga aga kaninyo nga tanan, durugin kasalamat sa inyong pagpalangga, ka inyong Inday Loren at sa inyong panunood ng Stories for a Better Normal. Okay, good morning. I will get to all of you. We start with Attorney Lesley Cordero. Okay, Lesley, from the time that you were in communications, and of course you're a lawyer, how did you find yourself interested in disaster risk reduction, and tell us about the work you do with the World Bank as a senior disaster risk management expert, and what is it that you know that we still don't know, that are not included in our laws, policies, and programs that we can apply not just nationally, but for every local government to follow, so that we would reduce disaster risk and invest more in DRR, CCAM, so that we would be less vulnerable. Sorry, ang daming tanong, all in one question. So we have Attorney Lesley Cordero.
Thank you very much, Senator Loren. I remembered we met each other when we were, I think I was in the PCOO with Saxony Coloma, but I was drafted. It was more of a call of duty because back in 2012, I was asked by Secretary Almendras, who was at the Office of the Cabinet Secretary, to help him and be his Deputy Cabinet Secretary. And at that time, there was Typhoon Pablo. Remember, ma'am, in 1984, Typhoon Pablo, back in 2012, became the strongest typhoon that hit Mindanao. And it was a big challenge because Mindanao is usually not affected by this scale and impact of a disaster. So it leveled off several barangays in Compostela Valley and Davao Oriental. And then slowly, when Typhoon Yolanda made landfall in November 8 of 2013, and Senator Lacson was appointed as the Rehabilitation and Recovery Czar, I was asked to be his undersecretary and help the government in preparing the Yolanda Rehabilitation and Recovery Plan. And during this time, imagine mobilizing and coordinating with more than 30 government agencies. And what made the difference was that there were 14 provinces, 171 cities and municipalities across 6 regions that were affected by Typhoon Yolanda. So having to coordinate private sector, academe, civil society organizations, the affected communities, and local government, it was a big challenge. And here you can see in the next slide that there were several consultations and meetings that were conducted. And the challenge here was, how do you go and visit every province, every municipality and city to consult and hear what their needs are, what their challenges are, and try as fast as we can to be able to fix this. And at that time, they dubbed me as a disaster queen, simply because almost every day there were meetings with various clusters. And in fact, we were meeting with a team of Lara in DepEd because you know how many schools are damaged every time there is a major typhoon or an earthquake. And there were a lot of interviews, and it helped a lot that I had a good training in PCOO, because it was also the knowledge that we need to communicate better. We need to speak in a language that is understood by the affected as well as the local government units, so they can participate and they can help and contribute in the rehabilitation and recovery efforts. So you're asking, how was my journey, right? From the government to the World Bank, what am I doing now? And here you can see, ma'am, that in government, we were representing the Philippine government at the regional and global arena. And the bottom photos would show that during the negotiations in Sendai, Japan, for the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction of 2015 to 2030, Deputy Speaker Loren, then Senator, was the one leading the delegation, delivering the message of the Philippines. And every night until 12 midnight, she was there trying to listen as well as lead the discussions. And the Philippines was in the limelight because Haiyan was the strongest typhoon that made landfall by far. And everyone was watching, everyone was witnessing how the Philippines has responded as well as how we tried to recover from this category 5 of a disaster. And the next slide would show you that this whole experience allowed me to prepare and transition from government to the World Bank. But in terms of advocacy, in terms of what we are doing, it's a quick shift because what we are trained to do in government, the whole coordination, prioritizing the policies, you can see here that in dealing and discussing with some of the dignitaries and leaders of the United Nations and the ASEAN, it was also showing and showcasing what the government has already done and what are the gains that were already achieved from the 2009 Climate Change Act to the 2010 National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act. And all these two landmark legislation were sponsored and championed by Senator Loren. How was it? How difficult was it to transition? I remembered I left government back in May 2015 and joined the World Bank in June of 2015. And normally, when you're a new staff at the World Bank, you don't get deployed or asked to go to other countries. But here, I think 6 months into the job, I got a phone call asking that I be deployed to Myanmar to help in their post-floods and landslides needs assessment and to help them develop a recovery framework because the Myanmar government wanted to know how the Philippine government did the Typhoon Yolanda rehabilitation and recovery efforts. Then I realized that all those sleepless nights, all those meetings, and trying to make the rehabilitation and recovery plan for Yolanda paid in terms of efforts because it allowed me to also help and share our experiences, the challenges, as well as the lessons learned from Typhoon Haiyan to the government of Myanmar, as well as the government of Fiji when they were dealing with Tropical Cyclone Winston back in 2016. But how challenging was it? I found myself in a room full of men, and it was very difficult because knowing their culture, understanding, and helping them, it allowed me to also understand how best to send my message across. And my understanding is that even if you find yourself in a room of 20 old men making the decisions, when they know technical expertise and they know experience, hard grit experience from previous disasters, they will try to listen and absorb whatever information you are sharing. So what are we doing now at the World Bank? The World Bank engagement is also doing a policy shift similar to what the government is doing. Before, we were too focused on disaster response, but now there's a shift from disaster response to risk reduction in a more proactive position to risk management. We're talking about physical resilience, financial resilience, as well as social resilience. Ito yung mga early warning systems and making sure na yung climate resilience and disaster risk reduction will be a core consideration in planning as well as investments programming para sa mga key sectors natin. And then, of course, we are also helping government in disaster preparedness, making and developing this Ready to Rebuild program so that there will be a green and resilient recovery from disasters. And then we also looked at the Safer Schools program because we all know that when there's a major earthquake or a typhoon, then our schools usually suffer the brunt as well as our students. And then, of course, Senator Legarda is very familiar with this, resilience for cultural heritage assets. This was done back in 2013, 2014, when Bohol experienced a 7.2 magnitude earthquake, and we saw cultural heritage assets crumble. So what the Department of Tourism did was to ask the World Bank, how can we develop a tool so that we will help strengthen these assets even before the next earthquake or typhoon hits? And then, of course, financial resilience. The government has adopted a disaster risk financing and insurance strategy back in 2015. And now they are slowly developing and implementing some of these financial instruments like the CAT bonds, itong contingent credit facility na tinatawag nating CAT-PDO. So ito yung instrument na nandyan siya for 3 years. Kung may major disaster, may option yung gobyerno na mag-draw from this instrument. And then ang insurance para sa mga local government units. Ito yung 25 most vulnerable provinces sa Eastern Seaboard para hindi sila maghihintay kung gaano katagal ilabas yung pondo from the Enduring Fund or the national government. Because when something happens and the trigger or condition is met, yung pera mapupunta sa local government. And then insurance also para sa mga roads, bridges, schools, hospitals, tsaka yung mga critical infrastructure natin. And then of course, highlighting social resilience, yung development of the emergency cash transfer program with the DSWD. Kasi ginagalingan natin yung CCT or 4Ps or yung conditional cash transfer. Meron din tayong social amelioration program para sa pandemya. Pero yung kulang is pag may major disaster and wala ka dun sa listahan ng mga beneficiaries, pwede ka ba maka-avail kung biktima ka ng disaster? Here, the DSWD has already developed this emergency cash transfer program for implementation. And then of course, yung mga socio-economic resilience tool, para naman ma-measure natin hindi lang yung impact sa damage sa hard infrastructure, but also impact to social welfare as well as well-being. This slide would show you, tinatanong ni Deputy Speaker Loren, paano ba natin matutulungan yung mga local governments tsaka yung mga communities, di ba? Hindi lang tayo puro salita dito sa national government, ganyan. So, the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council as well as the Office of Civil Defense, together with the local government academy as well as the World Bank, developed a Ready to Rebuild, We Recover as One program. Ito po yung changing mindsets and helping build that culture of preparedness na lahat ng mga templates, lahat ng mga frameworks, ginawa na natin into a workbook. And ang goal is to train as many local government units to prepare a recovery plan even before a disaster happens. Kasi madaming components sa recovery plan yung pwede nang gawin kahit wala pang disaster. And we're looking at the first pioneer 100 local government units, around 500 technical staff, including the mayors and governors kung interesado sila. And of course, yung national government natin. In doing this Ready to Rebuild plan and rolling it out to train more people, ginagamit po natin yung GeoRisk Philippines. Etong next slide would show you, nakaka-proud to kasi yung Department of Science and Technology has already developed a platform, an integrated database para meron ng mga multi-hazard maps na maa-access ng mga tao. Itong slide na to ay merong mga components, di ba? Next slide would show you Hazard Hunter, GeoMapper, GeoAnalytics, as well as maps and other features. And hindi po to gawa ng development partner. Ito po ay galing sa Department of Science and Technology. And in training the local governments, we will use this platform. And si Yusek Rene Solidum of DOST and yung team niya will be there to help train the local governments kung paano to gagamitin, paano maa-access, and hindi lang to para sa mga tao sa gobyerno. Pwede din to sa akademya, sa civil society as well as private sector, and the students who want to understand more about the risk dito sa mga areas nila and to prepare better. And then, etong other project na ginagawa natin for COVID, we are helping the Department of Interior and Local Government develop a COVID-19 recovery framework. Etong next slide would show you na yung challenge ng mga local governments right now is paano mo i-address yung COVID response. And then may directive na kailangan mong gumawa ng recovery plan. How do you restart your economies, di ba? And then how do you bring into this framework yung vaccination program? And then kung may sudden spike, paano mo i-incorporate yun as you slowly reopen your respective LGUs as well as the economy. So here, malapit na itong matapos and ilo-launch na to ng DILG. And I'm sure most of the local government chief executives are also looking out for this one. And I think this one is more on pagod vibes. Senator Loren, I'm sure you're championing a lot of sustainable, inclusive, and resilient destinations, diba? I'm sure Antique has a lot of good beaches. So what we are thinking here is that after what happened to Boracay, the World Bank, Department of Tourism, and TIEZA has decided na it is crucial to have a more integrated approach in developing tourism destinations. So the World Bank is supporting the Philippine government in doing the sustainable, inclusive, and resilient tourism project. It is a partnership with DOT, TIEZA, and the local governments. Here we are looking at Bohol, Siargao, and Siquijor. And it is a platform for integrated approach and collaboration because yung ADB din, meron din silang project sa El Nido naman and Coron. And then what we are doing is also benchmarking on global good practices and the global experience. How did the other countries do this? Thailand, Mexico, as well as Indonesia, Singapore. So these are the components that we are looking at in the project. So we have upgrading of local infrastructure, promoting tourism development, and then highlighting the need for strengthening DRM and crisis management. Kasi naalala natin na itong Bohol, itong Siargao, palaging tinatamaan ng bagyo tsaka earthquake. And now that there is a pandemic, how do you establish this health and safety protocols and restore the confidence of tourists as well as the local communities? And then supporting policy and project management. Knowing na ang tourism is one of the key drivers of economic recovery. So we need to prepare our destinations for the reopening. So I'll stop there, Senator Loren.
This is so interesting. First, I will start from the last. Resilient infrastructure for tourism so that our economy can bounce back. In the middle, you mentioned also about DRR and resilience for LGUs. Yes, I was in Comval. I can't remember now. I hope they can find a photo of that barangay. I remember where yung barangay captain linikas ang mga tao sa isang barangay hall. Yung barangay hall na yon nasa purple sa mapa dahil ang mga LGUs ay walang knowledge or wala silang mapa kung saan yung hindi dapat paglagyan ng struktura. Kaya mula noon 2012, I think, nung panahon ng magkasunod yun, Pablo sa Mindanao at saka Sendong din, ay in-advocate ko bilang pangalawang terminong senador na magkaroon ng hazard, risk, vulnerability mapping, soft at hard copy ang bawat lokal na pamahalaan. So, una, sa turismo, para umangat ang ekonomiya, at pangalawa, ang kaalaman ng ating mga lokal na pamahalaan sa kanilang mga risk at vulnerability at bago magtayo ng struktura, multipurpose hall, DepEd school building, barangay health station, dapat alam yan. Imbis sa mga mukha naming mga politiko, ang nasa mga barangay hall, kailangan may tarpaulin na mga mapa. Pero ideally, soft copy. Pero pag soft copy, kung walang internet, kamukha sa amin, hindi naman yung 590 barangays may internet, so may hard copy pa rin, paminsan-minsan. Ayan. Can you stress on that, Attorney Lesley? And gusto ko mag-collaborate tayo para sa LGU, para tong binabanggit natin, first, as a UN Global Champion, pangalawa, as a World Bank Senior Disaster Risk Expert. Both of us, we know how to communicate in the national, global, and importante sa lokal. Ako, Kinaraya, ikaw Bisaya, yung iba sa Bicolano, sa Ilocano, we can translate it in our languages and dialects along with the Wikang Filipino Commission, KWF, para mapatupad because it is ignorance that kills. Okay, I've said too much. Tell us first, yung sa mga mapa, paano maiintindihan ng isang kapitan sa liblib na lugar ang kanyang mga risk at vulnerability at hazards. Una, paliwanag mo yung tatlong definition na maiintindihan nila. Hazard, risk, at vulnerability. Or wag na natin definition of terms, pinapahirapan pa natin ang buhay. Sige, paano na lang nila maiintindihan, paano nila malalaman, kamukha sa amin, umulan, nag-landslide, gumuho ang bundok. O, yung nakatira sa paan ng bundok, hindi nalisan dahil hindi naman nakakaabot ang impormasyon lahat sa duktok. Yon. How do we operationalize all these beautiful concepts, all the great work we all do collectively, all these art cards you prepared? Paano? You can even say it in Cebuano, in Bisaya. Ayan. Tell me, paano natin i-cascade sa LGU hanggang sa barangay Purok Sitio? Yun.
Yeah. Tama ka, Senator Loren. And I think ni-legislate mo na to eh. And aside from legislating, you went the extra mile, di ba? Naalala ko, gumawa ka ng mga handbook that is easy to understand. And I think etong mga hazard maps natin, slowly ginagawa ni DOST. So the key here is to partner with DOST para ibaba natin sila sa level ng purok, barangay, and yung mga community-based associations, matatap din natin, pati yung mga students. And kailangan din natin isama yung mga schools and universities, di ba? As multiplier effect. I-train natin yung mga teachers to help out in doing and cascading this training. But tama ka rin na ang key dito is yung mga mapa natin and turuan natin sila kung paano gamitin. And very basic, si Yusek Rene Solido has a very good way of translating this in a language na simple, understandable, di ba ma'am? So kailangan natin tong gawin. And what we're trying to do is pilot this in training our LGUs. So gagamitin natin, aside from the hard copies, etong mga online platform. Kasi accessible din siya ma'am sa mga cellphones. Hindi na lang kailangan na computer as long as may wifi ka.
Yun nga.
Meron
yung Geo, kanina I couldn't keep up with your yung Geo Hunter, Geo Map. Ano yun? Oo.
Ang GeoRisk Philippines, ito
GeoRisk.
yung platform na dinevelop ng DOST. Tapos meron siyang mga tools or application. Ang tawag niya ay Hazard Hunter. So itatype mo yung address mo dito sa Manila or dun sa Antique, tapos lalabas kung ano yung mga hazards na nasa paligid mo. Baha, bagyo.
Okay, pwede mong gawin ngayon din, ilagay mo ako, Barangay Magaba, Pandan Antique. Lalabas ba yan sa telepono mo ngayon? Totoo?
Nasa LTE lang ako, ma'am. Pero tatawagin ko si yung Secretary. Pwede nating i-explain sa kanya.
Gagawa tayo.
Sige,
gagawa tayo ng isa pang special na webinar. Focus lang on ito. Kasama si Yusek Rene para meron tayong scientific expert, ikaw abogado, ako naman yung lawmaker. Tapos sama natin yung liga ng municipality at liga ng syudad at liga ng barangay para maintindihan. Yan. Sana check na niya. Barangay Magaba, Pandan Antique. Anong hazard ko? Ayan. Baka pero maganda cove kami doon eh. Anyway, continue. So,
paglabas ma'am sa mga hazards, meron na ding lalabas na mga mitigation efforts. So, as a person, you will know or your family will know kung ano yung dapat niyong gawin. How do you prepare when something like this happens?
So dinevelop to ng DOST, ilagay mo lang yung address mo, ay lalabas yung hazard. Sa panahon ngayon, sikat ang araw, wala ngayong hazard. Pero siguro bandang pag malakas ang ulan, baka gumuho ang bundok, malambot na yung lupa. Ayan, so ang dapat lumikas ka na ngayon. Ganon. Bakit hindi yan ginamit sa panahon ng Ulysses? Nangyari tuloy yung sa Region 2, sa Cagayan at Isabela.
Slowly nila ngayon ma'am ini-integrate and alam naman natin na kailangan mag-usap-usap yung mga ahensya as well as yung local government. So the key here now is to make sure na ma-introduce itong platform na to.
Bago lang itong platform ng DOST ito.
I think 2019 ma'am, and minandate ni Presidente lahat ng mga ahensya at GOCCs and GFIs na gamitin ito. And
parang hindi pa siya naro-roll out eh. Dapat kasama yan sa vaccine roll out eh. Okay. Okay. You also mentioned about COVID recovery. Paano natin mako-connect ang disaster risk reduction, ang ating paghahanda sa mga extreme weather events. O simplihan ko na, ang ating paghahanda sa tag-init at sa tag-ulan, sa baha at sa init ng panahon. Ayan. So paano natin, anong connection yan sa COVID-19 recovery? Paano magagamit ang konsepto?
Ang COVID-19 recovery, ang recovery framework na binubuo natin together with ILG, ang pinaka main concept nito is galing sa DRM and climate resilience because diba, government, both national and local, alam na alam nila mostly yung disaster risk management and climate because of the two legislations that you have passed, diba? So ngayon na merong COVID, ang ginawa natin is kinostomize natin. Ano ba yung mga applicable na frameworks? Ano ba yung mga programs, projects, and activities? Ano yung mga pondo na available na pwedeng magamit from the DRM to the pandemic?
Yes.
And of course, you also pass yung Bayanihan Laws 1 and 2, di ba? So these are all complementary na mga legislation. Pero ang crucial, ma'am, is yung mindset na with COVID, di ba, mas mahihirapan tayo. Hindi na lang siya yung standard natin na response, recovery, and rehabilitation. Kasi kailangan nating intindihin paano yung social distancing, paano yung mga health and safety protocols. And we all know na hindi naman aalis yung COVID in the next 2 years, di ba? So kailangan siya i-factor in. Ito yung tinatawag natin, ma'am, na compound risk. So paano pag may COVID, tapos may El Nino, di ba? And then you will have the drought as well as the food shortage.
So very good.
The slow onset disasters.
Ang ibig mong sabihin ay ang COVID recovery ay dapat akma sa climate crisis recovery as well. I've always said that dapat sabayan. Hindi pwedeng one or the other. We cannot go back to the old norm. It should be not just the new norm but the better normal. So ang sustainable recovery ng COVID ay attuned sa climate recovery. Ang galing, very good. So anong manganganak itong ating party mo kasi we have 2 other guests who are equally interesting. We can do a special webinar with USEC Solidum at i-cascade natin ang iyong expertise at kaalaman sa World Bank para sa LGUs para din maintindihan nila. Last, before we proceed to the other guests, you talked about Bohol, Siquijor, Siargao. There are many other tourist sites, including, let's say, my own province in Pandan, which is just across Boracay. We have every LGU is so beautiful. Paano natin gagawin resilient ang pag-recover sa ating ekonomiya sa mga tourism sites?
Yeah. Kailangan natin tingnan. Meron tayong mga standards already, di ba, sa disaster as well as climate resilience. Building resilience sa floods or earthquakes. Yan, dapat nakakahon na yan. Ang crucial, paano natin ma-integrate yung hygiene preparedness, yung preparedness for pandemic. And then also, kailangan natin i-prepare yung pagplano ng mga Bohol, Siargao, Siquijor, and other destinations and other LGUs so that mas mabilis makabounce back kung merong bagyo or merong lindol or merong other disasters. Naalala mo, ma'am, yung Bohol, yung 7.2 magnitude earthquake in 2013, October, na-realize ko doon na ang pinaka-challenge ng governor doon is how do you reopen, di ba, tourism destinations kung wala pang ilaw, di ba? Because hindi pa na-set up or yung na-electrify yung mga affected areas. And yung hiningi niya is tulungan nyo kami para mapabilis to so that we can recover on our own. Hindi na kami maghihintay sa national government.
Very good.
So how do you help LGUs do that in a destination?
Yes.
So that
and I'm glad you mentioned about cultural heritage assets dahil yun ay gaya ng ating katawan at sarili at komunidad, kailangan din pangalagaan ang ating mga cultural, yung mga tangible heritage assets sa panahon ng krisis. So we thank you. I wish I had more time with you, but we are connected anyway, and we will continue to do this. We should do a part 2 of this. I am so grateful to Attorney Lesley Cordero, our World Bank Senior Disaster Risk Specialist. I'm so grateful also to Lara, who is heading our DepEd implementation of climate resilience among our youths and learners. And let's have the webinar with teacher training. I will do it willingly for free. We can do it perhaps by island groups, by regions, and I can make my lectures very simple, understandable. We can even have translators in the different languages and dialects. And I'm grateful, of course, to Louise. I'd like to learn more about cacao and be, well, I'm a farmer because I grow my own food, but not full time because, as you know, I'm a lawmaker. But thank you to each of you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to our partners, the Climate Change Commission, the Institute of Climate and Sustainable Cities, Climate Reality Philippines, and the DepEd and the Department of Agriculture, ATI. We're giving away starter kits. So they will flash those who won. The first Facebook viewers na babae who won, who got free coffee. 1 minute, I'll show you. This is the coffee I grow. It was my grandmother who planted the coffee trees, Robusta, and I harvested it the slow way. Alam mo ko, slow food, slow living, sustainability, but I'm very fast. These are the winners. I will give one each to our guests, but I will give 5 Robusta coffee, limited edition. Binebenta ito sa Eco Store, only 25 pieces. But I'm giving away my share from my own harvest to Lesley, Sarah, Lara, and Louise. And 5 na nakikinig sa Facebook. It is Victoria of Climate Change who will determine that. And of course, the starter kits. And I wish this could go on and on. We have our responsibilities, and I congratulate all of you for the great work you're doing. I am no longer alone as I was in the 1990s. I'm so glad to be, to share the platform, to share my advocacy. You are doing great work, Lesley, Lara, Louise, and many more in your teams, in your group. I will be in touch with you. Keep up the good work. Sa akin mga palangga, sa Antique, sa Panay, durogin ka salamat, sa Inday Loren, palangga ko kamo. Thank you so much.